recording? No, I am recording. Hello everyone, I'm Saira and today I'm gonna teach you how to make your very own Harry Styles cardigan. So I'm pretty sure you've seen this trend going around. It started on TikTok and just like everyone started making their own cardigan, and I just had to try it and make my own. The first time I saw him wearing this cardigan, I was like, I really like the cardigan. It looks so good. I love it.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never the same.
And then I looked it up and it was $1,000. I was like, okay, I can't afford it. And I was just like, okay, I just let go of the cardigan. And then I started seeing people making it on TikTok and I was like, doesn't look that hard. Maybe I should try it. And I decided to make my own, and here's the result. Here's how it looks. So all throughout the process I collected some like tips, some like tricks I guess, and yeah, I learned a lot while making it. It's the first time I make something like this. Like I've never in my life made a sweater. So I decided to make this video where I put like all of the resources that I use to learn how to make this, and also just like what I did, like my own take on how to make this sweater, because like I feel like people are following the pattern, like the official pattern, but also like everyone's just putting a twist in it, and it's just like whatever works for you. You just have to make it work and you can make your own cardigan. Now that we're done with the introduction, let's get started with how to make your own cardigan. For me, it was a lot of trial and error at the beginning, well, even at the end. All through the making of the sweater, it was a lot of trial and error. Like I had to start over so many squares. I was working on a black square and it didn't work out, so I undid it all. So yay, and I'm starting again with a different stitch. No, I'm looking at this lady, she looks really happy. I don't feel like that. Yeah. It's very time consuming. So it says that it's like for beginners, from beginners to intermediate. Yeah, and it's easy. It has like easy stitches to make, and it's very practical since it's all square. So if you've never made a cardigan, like it's just a bunch of squares and you put it together, so it's kind of pretty simple. If I did it, you can do it, but it is time consuming and it requires some skill. So just, I feel like knowing that it's gonna make you feel better if you make a mistake or something. Also, I started and I was making my squares. I had like 25 squares done or something, and then J.W. Anderson, which is the designer of this cardigan, released a pattern on how to make it, and it turns out that I wasn't completely wrong, but I was making the squares too big and it just wasn't how it was supposed to be. So I had to start all over. By that point I had been working on it for like 2 weeks, so yeah, it was kind of sad. I kind of cried that day, but then I got over it and I started all over and it was fine. The squares the second time around with the pattern were smaller, so it was a little bit faster. Even though I use a J.W. Anderson pattern, I also did it like my own way. The pattern is meant for knitting and I did it all crochet because I just can't knit. So yeah, I made some adjustments to that pattern to make it work for me. And yeah, don't be afraid to like put your own twist in it, because we are not, well, like most of us are not professional knitters or something. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So first, let's talk about all the materials you're gonna need. I bought these 3 hooks and I ended up using all 3 for different stitches. These are the buttons I used. And then this is all the yarn. So blue, black, red, yellow, green, and orange. I don't think the brand matters as long as they are the color you want and the thickness in all of them matches. Now that you have all of your materials, let's talk about the square. So again, this is all made up of squares, which makes it so much easier. Just know there is a lot of squares, but it's very satisfying when you start seeing your pile of squares go up and up. It's so satisfying. These are all of the squares. I made 72 in total. Don't let them drop. It's really sad having to pick them all up. And then you're gonna need a total of 14 green, 10 black, 10 red, 12 orange, 14 yellow, and 12 red and black. Now let's get into details about the squares. So I decided that I'm not gonna teach you in this video how to make every single stitch, just because I don't think I'm gonna be good at it, because I barely know how to make them myself, even though I did get better with practice, because that you're gonna make so many squares of each stitch that you're almost gonna become an expert in each one, and the more you make, the better they look. So yeah, don't be discouraged if the first square you make it's not good. It's gonna get so much better. I cannot tell you how many times I started a square and I was like, that doesn't look like the stitch, like it doesn't look like the stitch is supposed to look, and I would like rip it all off and start all over again. But at the end, you're gonna get it, I promise. So I am gonna tell you what stitch I use for each square. I use a different one for each color, and I'm gonna leave links in the description for the tutorials that I used on every stitch. So those tutorials for me are like the best ones. Those people do a better job at explaining how to make each stitch than I would. So yeah, I'm just leaving the resources here for you to use them, and I'm being practical and being honest, and I'm just gonna leave you with who I think would be better at teaching you to make the stitches. They're very simple stitches, and they're like very beginner like. I guess like the hardest one is the orange. It's one of my favorites because it looks really pretty. Once you get the hang of it, you just have to think about it, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty simple, and the rest of them are just super easy. Yeah, I guess like one of my recommendations is to start with, you can start maybe with the green ones because those are like the basic stitch, and then you can move on to black, and then yellow, and then maybe red. Do the red ones before you do the black and red, because the red ones are gonna give you so much practice for the two color ones, and then maybe leave the orange ones for last, because they're not hard, but it's just a little bit more, it requires a little bit more of a skill. So yeah, and then the last thing I did was all of the ribbing, so the cuffs and the bands at the bottom, because I felt like I had more experience now that I've done the squares, and that way they were so much easier to make. Let's get into the details. So every color has a different stitch, and you're gonna have to make different sizes for some of them. The reason why you have to do this is because the top rows of the back and the two front panels are a smaller size, so you're just gonna have a large and a small. The large ones are 14 by 14 centimeters, and the small ones are 12 by 14 centimeters. For the green one, you're gonna need 12 large ones and 2 small ones. I used the single crochet stitch, and I started with a chain of 20 to 21 depending on how tight you crochet. The black ones are super simple. You're gonna need 10 large ones. I used the moss stitch, and I started with a chain of 25. For the red ones, you're gonna need 6 large ones and 4 small ones. I used the waistcoat stitch, and I started with a chain of 18 to 20 depending on how tight you crochet. For the orange, you're gonna need 8 large ones, 3 small ones, and a neck piece. I used the garter stitch crochet style, and I started with a chain of 23 or 24. Again, it depends on how tight you crochet. For the yellow ones, you're gonna need 12 large ones, 1 small one, and a neck piece. I used the double moss stitch and started with a chain of 26. Let's move on to the ones that almost made me give up. So for the red and black ones, you're gonna need 12 large ones. I used a tapestry crochet stitch and started with a chain of 22. One last thing about the squares, the top squares, there's 2 top squares at the front, one yellow, one orange. Those need to have like a special stitch because they're like the parts that go in the neck parts, so they have like a curve to them to give it like a shape. So just keep that in mind. For the neck piece, I would think about the wrong side and the right side, especially with the orange because it's more noticeable and this would matter at the end. I would start by stitching 5 centimeters as normal, and then I would skip 2 stitches before starting on the wrong side. So 1, 2, I would chain 1, as you can see, and then skip another 2 from the top. So 1, 2, and chain. And then I would just stitch as normal. Once I reach the end of the row, I would stop 2 stitches before the end, and then again chain 1, and then start 2 stitches after from the top. So again, skip those 2 stitches and then you chain, and then again stitch as normal. And then I would do the same one more time, so 3 times in total. So just stop 2 stitches before, chain 1, and skip 2 stitches from the top, and then work as normal. Then you should keep crocheting without skipping any stitches until you reach 12 centimeters, and you should have a shape like this. Now let's talk about the band. So like all of the red ribbing, and then the cuffs and the blue band. First of all, I was terrified because I wasn't sure how to make this type of stitch. This is called ribbing, and it's when like when the stitch kind of like stretches like this, and I wasn't sure how it was called, and I was terrified, and that's part of the reasons why I left it to last, because I wasn't sure. And then I found out that it's called ribbing, and that's how you make it. And there is a form of crochet that creates the ribbing look. So I found a bunch of tutorials. I'm gonna leave some of them down below. And then for the neck, I wanted to have a certain look. Like I wanted to make sure that it looks like the real one. And to create that effect, I did 1 row of slip stitches, then 1 row of single crochets. Okay, now let's talk about the blue bands. These bands, I made them, I think I started them over like 3 times because I would make them too long. First I made them with the wrong stitch, then I made them too long. I think I made them too long like twice, to be honest, and then I finally got them. Yeah, so this one has the ones with the holes. I'll leave a tutorial for that down below. It's really easy. I was afraid of it, but it turns out it's really easy. So for the blue bands, the best advice I can give you is just to wait until you're done and then make them. So just attach everything, even the red part at the bottom, and then make the blue bands. That way you can be sure that you make them the right size and don't have to start over like 3 times like I did. You're gonna need 2 blue bands, one with buttonholes and the other one for the buttons, 2 small red bands, 2 medium red bands, and 1 really long red band. Also the color. For the front bands, I did 2, one for the right and one for the left. I used the crochet ribbon technique and did 2 rows of slip stitches and 1 row of single crochet. I started with a chain of 12 and they measure 7 by 40 centimeters. For the long one that goes in the back, it's the same as the medium bands, but this one measures 7 by 84 centimeters. The same goes for the cuffs. I made these to be half as what the squares in the sleeves measure. So they are 7 by 35 centimeters, and I also started with a chain of 12, and it's the same crochet ribbing technique. For the blue bands, I used the single crochet technique, and they measure 6 by 48 centimeters, and I started with a chain of 68. For one band, you're gonna have to leave the buttonholes. I did 2 stitches and then a buttonhole, and then 11 stitches and then a buttonhole all the way down, except for the last 2 holes, which are only separated by 3 stitches. Here's how I attach the buttons. It's just like a normal button, to be honest. But I lay down the buttonhole band on top of the other band and then marked the hole so I could make sure that I was having the buttons exactly where they should be. The color, I used the crochet ribbon technique and I did 1 row of slip stitches and 1 row of single crochet all the way down. I started with a chain of 32 and it measures 20 by 45 centimeters. Also, I added a row of single crochets to the side that was going to be attached to the cardigan. So once you have all of your squares in your cuffs and everything, you can lay it all out. So you go to the pattern and just put out the squares where they are gonna be at the end. First I did the back and then I did the front, and it's so satisfying to see it all laid out because you're almost there, like you're almost done with it. So yeah, it's really satisfying. It's also really nice to know that no matter what, you have enough squares so you don't have to make any more. Also, laying it all out gives you a clear image of where everything's gonna go, and that way you avoid making mistakes when you're like attaching it. When you lay it out, you want to look at the pattern, and then you want to think of the cardigan as it having 5 big pieces. So you have the back, the front left, the front right, and 2 sleeves. For the back, the top orange square goes on the left. For the left front, the top orange square is the neck piece. For the right, the top yellow square is the neck piece. The neck pieces are the ones that your blue bands are going to attach to, and the side that measures 14 centimeters goes on the top. And for the sleeves, the row that starts with an orange and ends with the green are the ones that go at the bottom, so the cuffs are attached to that row. So once you have laid it all out and you know that you have enough squares, you like how it looks, it's time to put it all together. This is what I did to attach the squares. This is what I did all the way around. Even when I was putting together the whole cardigan, I used this big needle. I don't know what it's called, but this is the one that I used. I would start with my set of 4 squares and then pick 2, and the backs are facing me, put them together, and then I measured a piece of yarn that is 3 times the size of the squares. I would go in through the first stitch of both squares and make a knot. Then I would go in through the second stitch of both squares, just like this, and then make sure the needle goes through the loop that it's created, pull it through. That way it makes like a little bit of a knot. I also like to put like the remaining strings through that to make it more secure, and that's what I would do all the way down. If one of the squares have more stitches than the other square, I would double on the square that has less stitches, and that way it would be even. Once I reach the final stitch, I would go through it as normal, but then I would go through it again from the top to create a knot. So like this, go through the top and just create a little knot, and then I would add this extra step to just pull the needle through some of the stitches so some of the remaining yarn can go through it and it will be more secure. And then you just cut it, and that's how it looks, and you just do that over and over again until you're done. While I was looking at the pictures, something that wasn't mentioned in the pattern but I kept seeing in the pictures of the original one, it had this like chain stitch all around the sleeves and the bottom. And if you attach it like you attach like the squares, you're not gonna get that chain effect. So I attach all of the red parts with a chain stitch to give it like that chain effect, because I wanted to look as close to the original one as possible. And it was super easy. This is what I used to create the chain stitch, red yarn, and then I put the hook here, but I used the big needle. Then I laid it all out to avoid making a mistake, and got to work. So I measured everything and I added a safety pin to each corner just to avoid it moving around too much. But if you don't have safety pins, don't worry, you don't need them. It didn't did a lot anyways. I'll do my best at explaining this, but remember that I also have a link down below that would have a way better explanation. So in this case, I have the front facing me, but I'm still gonna go in through the back. So grab a stitch from the red band and then pull it through the black square, or just like the square you're working with. In this case, I had a long end of yarn at the end of my red band that I left to purposely attach it to all of the squares, so I'm not going to make a knot. I'm just going to pull it through. Now we're going to start creating that chain effect. So pull all of it through Just make sure about that and see how I didn't make a knot. Now you're gonna put the needle through the same hole that you just came through. Remember to grab some of that red and just pull it through, but not all the way. You're gonna leave a small loop like this, and that's what's gonna create the chain effect. Then from the back, grabbing some of that red, you're gonna pull the needle through that loop, see, and pull it all through, and then you're gonna go back in through that same hole, grab some red and pull it almost all through, because you're gonna have to create another loop for that chain effect. And that's basically what you're gonna do all the way down. I hope that made sense. Just remember to always grab a stitch from the red band to make sure that it's attaching to the squares. To attach the blue bands, I also added some safety pins at the corner of each side to make sure that it doesn't move around. And then I use embroidery thread, but I would not recommend you to use that. I suggest to just stick to the normal yarn. I wanted it to be invisible from the front, but when you look at it from the inside, it doesn't look nice. So yeah, just stick to the normal yarn. I basically used the same technique I did for the squares. The only difference is I made sure that I would hide the thread from the front so you would not be able to see it. So just hide it on the one of the stitches or pull it through one of the stitches so you can't see it from the front. To attach the neck, I folded in half and then put it at the middle of the cardigan and added 3 safety pins so it would not move. And when I was making the piece, I left a really long string of yarn to attach it to the cardigan, and that's what I used to attach it from one of the sides towards the center. That's kind of like against what the pattern says, but it worked for me. So, you know, do what it's best for you. I used the same technique as the squares, but this time I did a little bit more math. I counted how many stitches I had on the neck piece and how many stitches I had on the squares to make sure that I added the same amount of stitches to the right side as to the left side. Also, keep in mind that you would have to add 1 or 2 stitches from the front bands. So from the blue bands, you also want to attach them to the neck. Just 1 or 2 stitches, not too much. You'll have to make a decision about the sleeves. Do you want them to be, if you want them to be a little bit puffy or not. Mine are like kind of gave them a little bit of that puffy look, so they're not as loose as the original ones, but they're still loose. You can see I added the chain stitch before attaching it. It's just decoration. It's not doing anything, and that is how it looks from the back. Also, you can see that my bands are half the size of the whole row of squares. To attach the cuffs, I made sure first that it looked like the other one, and then I have the wrong side facing me, and then I'm gonna pull the needle through the top of the squares. Wait a minute, yeah, there we go. So through the top and then through one of the stitches of the cuffs, and I'm just gonna make a knot. So obviously I have more stitches from the square side than on the cuffs, so every time I would start a stitch, I would grab a couple of stitches from the square and attach it to one stitch from the cuff, and that would create that like bunched up effect. And yeah, they're not like too puffy, but it has like that like puffy effect because of that. I don't know if there is a better way to attach this, but I don't know it, and I was just using the technique that I knew from like the squares, and I'm not an expert, so yeah. And that's kind of how it looks. Just make sure that at the end you attach all of the squares to the cuff, and then you can just add the sleeves to the cardigan, and it's so nice to see. Finally, I just work with the details, so I created the tassels. They're like 3 centimeters long, and then I just cut some of the long strings of yarn from the inside of the sweater and the outside, just to give it a cleaner look and to feel like I'm getting closer to that $1,000. And that is it. That's all you need to make your very own Harry Styles cardigan. It's time consuming, but you can do it. Now just have like 5, that's 10, have 5 general tips that I want to give you, just to like motivate you to do it, and also just like when you're doing it, just like keep you going, and just like little things that I learned along the way. So number 1 is to be patient. I think I've said this a lot through this video, but just remember that this is very time consuming. It's also like if you're a beginner with knitting or crocheting, it's gonna take you, it might take you a little bit longer just because you're learning how to crochet or how to knit. So be patient with yourself. Don't give up if you make a mistake. You can start all over. It's fine. Just know that it's gonna take some time. It took me like a month to finish it, so yeah, just know that. My second tip is to put on some good music or a good TV show and just crochet away. While I was making this cardigan, I watched like 3 seasons of Grey's Anatomy, 3 seasons of Teen Wolf, and a bunch of movies. So if you put on like a good TV show, like you want to catch up on a show or something, that helps a lot, because it's very time consuming and you get entertained while doing it. Also play some Harry Styles to remind you why you're making this cardigan, because you might forget at some point. At some point I was like, is it even worth it? But it is. And if you play some Harry Styles, you'll be like, okay, that's why I'm doing it. Or just play any other music that you like. Something to like keep you motivated and like a little bit entertained, because it could be a little bit tiring to just be like crocheting all the time. I also listen to some books. Like I think I got through 2 books while working on this sweater. My third tip is to do what's best for you. So the original pattern from J.W. Anderson is for knitting, so that means 2 needles, and I don't know how to do that. Like I can't. I tried, I can't do it. It just doesn't work for me. So I took the pattern and then I turned it into crocheting. So I was able to find tutorials to make the same stitches but crochet style, and that was way easier for me. So my mom kept telling me that knitting was easier, and I tried and I just couldn't do it. So just do whatever's best for you. My 4th tip is to not think that it has to be exactly the same. So when I started, I wanted it to be like exactly the same cardigan. Like I want it to be like the original, like you wouldn't notice a difference, and that's almost impossible. You can change things around to give it to add a little bit of your personality. Other people are changing the sleeves. At the end of the day, it's your cardigan and you're getting inspired by the one that Harry wore. So yeah, don't be afraid to make changes, and don't get upset if it doesn't look exactly the same. Even when I was working on it, when I started accepting that it wasn't gonna look exactly the same, I made some changes in some of the front panels, like how I arranged the squares, and I also made some changes in the sleeves, like how I arranged them, which wasn't the best idea. It turned out it didn't work out. Well, it wasn't the right decision, but at the end it worked out, so it's fine. Yeah, and then also like there were some like shapes, like you know how you make the neck shape. There was also some for the shoulders, and I just could not understand how to make that, so I just made a square and it worked out. So know that it doesn't have to be exactly the same as the pattern or as the original cardigan. You're making it your own, and I feel like keeping that in mind it's good for you while you're working on it, because sometimes it could be just really hard to just work on it and make a mistake or something and be like, oh, it's not the same now. But yeah, so just keep that in mind. And my 5th and last tip is to take breaks. I am the kind of person that just sits down and works on something until I'm done. So whether it's an essay, editing a video, whatever it is, I just sit down and I don't get up until I'm done. And that's not good for you. And this cardigan is not going to take you a day. So take breaks. It took me a while to like decide to take breaks. But little by little I started forcing myself to take breaks, and once you take a break you come back refreshed and start working on it faster and you make less mistakes. So it's good to take breaks, it's good for your health, and yeah, just take breaks. And that is it. That's all I have about the Harry Styles cardigan. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, give it a thumbs up. It would really help me. Yeah, let me show you a fun thing. Once I was done, I was like, oh, well, now I can make sweaters. So I made one for my kitty. So now she has one for her. Like, look at this. It's tiny. I didn't have any more green, so I used some blue, and I was running out of red. So yeah, it's not exactly the same, but it's like, you know, it looks like it. So it's so cute, and she looks so cute wearing it. I love it. I'm thinking about making one and maybe giving it away, or maybe sell a couple. Maybe even sell a couple of the ones for cats or dogs, pets in general. So if you're interested, you can DM me on my Instagram and we can talk about the details. And yeah, like if you like how mine turned out, like I can make you one, sell you one. And I might also, I don't know, really, like I was gonna say like for fun, but it's kind of fun, but it's also kind of like really frustrating. I might make another one and give it away, so we'll see about that. Stay tuned for that. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments and I'll answer them. Also, I made a bunch of like little tutorials on my TikTok, so I recorded the process of making the cardigan on my TikTok, so I have lots of short tutorials in there that you might want to check out. Almost kind of like the same as here, but sometimes like a different perspective can help. So yeah, I also have that in there, and I might also be able to be more specific with a certain stitch or something in there. So yeah, if you have a question about that, maybe I can make a short video on TikTok or something. So I'll leave the link for my TikTok down below too. I really hope that you find this video useful, and I hope you get to work and make your very own cardigan, because it's gonna look awesome, I promise. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time with a new video. Bye!